Welcome to another episode of Mike's Money Picks. Today on the podcast, we are here to talk about the college football playoff. In the words of Jim Mora, playoffs? Yep, that's right. We're talking about playoffs. And I have been so looking forward to this. We talked at the very start of the season. I think this is the most anticipated season of college football ever. We had the college football video game come out, which is very near and dear to my heart. We had the 12-team playoff. We had just all this hype and media attention around college football, and it is not disappointed. And we are now here to this first round of the playoff games. And we are here on this episode to break down all three opening round college football playoff games for Saturday, December 21st. We're going to tell you what you can expect for each game, as well as who needs to be in or out of your DFS lineups on DraftKings as well as FanDuel for this college football playoff slate. If you are doing things like player props or underdog drafts or something like that, all of this can apply to you as well, because we're going to break down all the games from a holistic standpoint and just tell you what you can expect from each one and how you can really build some lineups and win some money off of those three games. Now, if you have not already, make sure you are subscribed to the channel. That way you can be with us for the rest of the college football playoff, because this is just the opening round. That's the best part about the 12-team playoff is we've got opening round games this Saturday, but we've also got a quarterfinal, a semifinal, and a final coming up. So make sure you're subscribed. That way you can be with us for all of that content as well, in addition to all of our college basketball content. If you enjoy playing DFS for college football, you will enjoy DFS for college basketball as well. So I strongly encourage you to subscribe and stick around for that content all the way up through the Final Four. So let's go ahead and end the introduction there. We've got three playoff games to break down. That's right, playoffs. So really excited to do so. Let's start off with the noon game, SMU taking on Penn State. Oh, I realized I forgot to share my screen. Give me 1 second, y'all. All right, it should be sharing now. So anyway, we are talking about SMU taking on Penn State. Vegas has Penn State as 8.5-point favorites with a game total of 53.5 points. That is the highest game total on the slate by 2 points. That makes the implied total about 31-23 in favor of the Nittany Lions. And I gotta say, I don't really know what to make of either of these two football teams. I don't, because SMU, their only loss coming into the Clemson game was BYU, who's a good football team, and they did it with their, now benched quarterback Preston Stone. And against Clemson, they did not look great in the first half, but man, did they look good in the second. And so I just don't know which SMU team are we going to get. For Penn State, this is a team that for years has just kind of played down to competition and played down when playing better competition. So I just don't know if Penn State actually has what in them to beat a good football team. And they haven't really done that this year. They don't really have any impressive wins. So I don't know what to make of either of these two teams. I don't know what to make of this game. This is the only game in the college football playoff slate where I really don't have a strong lean in terms of who to bet or who to pick. Personally, I think SMU covers, but I'm not confident enough to bet them to cover or bet them to win outright. But I'm not a believer in Penn State. Penn State's going to have to make me a believer. Even though I'm not a believer in SMU yet, I know I'm not a believer in Penn State. Now, I do think that this is by far the most likely game on the slate to turn into a shootout. And here's why. Both of these teams are pass funnels defensively. What that means is both these teams can really shut down the run, can really make you one-dimensional and try to beat you throwing the ball. And so if teams are throwing the ball, then they're going to put up some more points. They're going to make some big plays. If they can't run and they're forced to throw. So I do think that is going to make this game environment one that can shoot out and one that is the most likely to shoot out. If you were wondering on the exact stats, SMU ranked 7th in the nation in rushing yards allowed per game and 95th in the nation in passing yards allowed per game, whereas Penn State on the other side are 10th in the nation in rushing yards allowed per game and 12th in the nation in passing yards allowed per game. So both of these defenses are pretty good. Both of these defenses are pretty stout. But I really do think that you're going to see a high passing volume with these two teams, not because they're teams that love to throw the football. Both these teams like to run the football, but because they're not going to be able to run. So how does that affect the DFS environment? Well, Kevin Jennings is SMU's quarterback. I think he's one of the best quarterback plays on the slate at $7,700. You look at just the level of consistency he's had in fantasy this year. Literally in every game he started, he's put up at least 18 DraftKings points. And he's been over 22 in well over half of them. He's had multiple games over 30. He's probably the most dual threat of all of the quarterbacks on the slate. They don't use him as a runner a ton, but he has the ability to do so, like we've seen it. And I really do think that he's quite likely to have a lot of passing volume in this game because of how Penn State can shut down the run. If he's forced to drop back enough times, he might end up with some scrambles as well. I think he's very clearly one of the best quarterback plays on the slate, in my opinion. At the running back position for SMU, the good news is they have a workhorse back in Brashard Smith. The bad news is that he kind of tends to disappear against better run defenses. Against Virginia, only 12.3 DraftKings points. Stanford, 8.6. Louisville, 9.9. So he does have some dud games here in the game log, and I'm kind of inclined to think that this is going to be another one. And when you look at the running back position of the whole slate, I just struggle to talk myself into paying up for Brashard Smith at $7,700 when there's other guys cheaper that I would prefer. So it just makes it really hard. I'm not saying I'm going to eliminate him from my player pool, but he's a tough click at $7,700. At the wide receiver position, the good news is SMU has really condensed their wide receiver rotation. It's made it a lot easier to target from a DFS perspective. Roderick Daniels Jr. is looking like their guy, but this is kind of good news and bad news. The good news is he's very clearly going to lead them in targets and probably catch the most passes on the team. The bad news is he doesn't do it in a way that's super explosive or productive for DFS. He catches a lot of short and intermediate routes, doesn't break off a lot of big plays. They will use him kind of out of the backfield as, a receiving and a rushing weapon. But really, you're really playing a guy for volume here in Roger Daniels Jr. I think he's a great cash game play. I do think he has GPP upside, but I do think that it's not like a super sexy profile. But in the last 6 games, he's been over double-digit fantasy points in all 6 of them. So he's definitely worth a click at $4,500. If you're stacking up Kevin Jennings, which I think you probably should be, he's probably candidate number 1. Jordan Hudson is the guy that I banged the drum for all season long as being their most talented receiver, the guy that needs to be their wide receiver 1. And there have been games where he shows it, like against Boston College where he put up 22.9, or Virginia where he put up 17.6. So I do think that there's a pathway for Jordan Hudson having a big game here at $4,000. If he actually comes through as Penn State's SMU's most talented receiver, then he's probably the most likely to get open here against this Penn State defense. Matthew Hibner is the tight end replacement for RJ Maryland, who was their just great all-conference level tight end who went down with an injury. And Hibner has not disappointed. In the last 4 games, he's been over 12 DraftKings points in all of them. He scored touchdowns in all 4 of those games, caught at least 3 passes in all 4 of those games. He's on the field a ton. He's not going to give you like a super big yardage total, but the fact that he has such a high target frequency in the red zone and high ability to score touchdowns, you got to like him at $3,900, and he's certainly going to make my player pool. And really, I'm not considering anybody outside of those 3 on this SMU receiving room. On the Penn State side, I think I finally came around on Drew Allar. Finally. We saw against Oregon, Drew Allar put up 30 DraftKings points. And how did he get there? Well, he got there with increased passing volume. He threw 39 passes, which was his second most in a game this season. He threw for 3 touchdowns, which was his most in a game this season. And he also ran the ball for 54 yards, which was a season high. And he ran for a touchdown as well. So really, Drew Allar did everything we look for in a fantasy quarterback in that game against Oregon. And when you look at how this SMU game lines up, if they're not able to traditionally run the football, that's going to lead to increased passing volume for Allar. It's going to be against a kind of soft Southern Methodist passing defense. I think that this really shapes up well for Drew Allar. And this is a guy that I don't play a ton. This is a guy that I haven't played a ton in the last 2 seasons in DFS because he's traditionally overpriced. He traditionally hasn't had a lot of passing volume. He traditionally hasn't run. And now you're getting him at $7,300 with a chance for increased passing volume and rushing upside. I like Drew Allar at $7,300, and that's not something I find myself saying a lot. I am going to have some lineups that play this as a game stack where I have Jennings on one side and Allar on the other, and hope and pray that this game sees significantly more points scored than the last 2. And I think that that's quite a possible outcome. At the running back position for Penn State, we've talked about it all season long. It is a 50-50 committee between Singleton and Allen. Both of them have their merits in this game. Nick Singleton is significantly more likely to break off a long run. He is significantly more likely to be used in the passing game. So if you're looking for who can succeed on low volume, who can succeed in a shootout, who can succeed if they go down, Nick Singleton checks those boxes. However, for the type of game that this could be, who is going to be the hard-nosed runner between the tackles that's going to grind out yards? It's Katron Allen. And he had 25 DraftKings points against Oregon. Not to say that Singleton was bad against Oregon, but Allen was slightly better on slightly more carries. So I really do think that both of them have their merits. I don't think that they should be priced as far apart as they are. So I think that Singleton makes a lot of sense, but don't totally discount Allen. Like I said, this SMU run defense is pretty tough, so there is a chance that this turns into like just a passing thing. But I really just think that I really think that I'm going to struggle to play both these Penn State running backs. I really think I'm going to focus on Drew Aller, but I am going to have some lineups that have Singleton and some lineups that have Allen. At the receiver position, the tight end, Tyler Warren, I think he's the best wide receiver play on the slate, even though he's not a wide receiver, but that's beside the point. He just consistently sees a ton of volume, a ton of targets. He's been in double-digit DraftKings points every single game this season. In the last 5 games, he's only had one underneath 20. Just super consistent. If you're playing cash games, he's got to be in your lineup. And he has the potential to break a slate as well. They will also use him as a wildcat running back and have him pick up rushing touchdowns. So I think he makes a lot of sense as a one-off play, makes a lot of sense as a stacking partner with Drew Aller, but I do think he is the best overall receiver on the slate, and I think it's by quite a wide margin, if I'm being all honest. Now, Harrison Wallace, welcome back, because he'd been pretty much unheard of for most of the season since his week 1 31-point outburst against West Virginia. But against Oregon, he had 459 and a touchdown. Look, if there's going to be increased passing volume for Penn State, then there's going to be a chance that some of these guys are going to catch some passes. And so Harrison Wallace at $3,700 is a guy that I'm certainly going to be considering, but I got to be honest, I'm probably not considering anybody after him. There's just no one else in this offense, not Amari Evans, not Julian Fleming, who just have a super consistent every down role and are targeted on a week in and week out basis. So I'm really just going to be sticking with Warren and Wallace. And really, it's probably going to be more so Warren than Wallace. I think an Aller double stack is in play, though, because, again, if the whole concept was Drew Aller was not a great DFS play because he had low passing volume, and now in this SMU game he's going to have passing volume, then you can play an Aller double stack with somebody like Warren and Wallace. All right, now let's go ahead and move on to game 2. The game that I care about, hook 'em. Clemson at Texas. Texas is 11.5-point favorites with a game total of 51.5 points. The implied total is about 32-20 in favor of the Longhorns. And I got to be honest, I think this Clemson team, what scares me is the fact that they are a well-coached group who is not going to beat themselves, and they're coming in with confidence. What does not scare me is that I think that this team is not that talented, and certainly not as talented as Texas. And when we saw them play Georgia, they just did not stack up physically. And I think that Texas is going to be able to do the same thing that Georgia was able to do against Clemson. Probably not as big of a margin of victory, but I think that Clemson is going to be able to dominate the line of scrimmage on both sides of the ball, and I think that Texas is going to be able to pull away from Clemson in this game. What's weird, though, is that watching Texas the last few weeks, Quinn Ewers has not been the 2023 Quinn Ewers that we saw, that was aggressive, that was hyper accurate, that was, taking shots downfield. But when they run RPOs and then run the quick game, he was just on point all the time. He's not been that recently. And it has me wondering if he's been hurt. It has me wondering if we could see Arch Manning in this college football playoff if Quinn Ewers struggles. But what you've seen from the Texas offense is they played hyper conservative with Ewers kind of not being himself, and you've seen a lot of rushing, you've seen a lot of volume for the running backs, and it makes me wonder if Texas, even if they get up in this game, are they going to go into this super conservative grind clock offensive mode? And I think that could really play into this game total hitting the under. If I'm being honest, I think if I were to be betting this game, not playing DFS, I would bet Texas to win outright. I would bet Texas to cover. I would bet the under. That would be what I would be looking at. Because like I said, I do think they're going to play super conservative. Now on the Clemson side, Clemson has a good news for us as DFS players. They have a super condensed offense in terms of who is scoring the fantasy points. The bad news for us is that they are going against what is arguably the top defense in college football. Texas only gives up 106 rushing yards a game, ranking 12th in the nation. They only give up 143 passing yards a game, first in the nation, second in both points per game allowed and yards per game allowed. This is an elite defense. This is a very tough matchup for Cade Klubnik. And I think that, when you look at Cade Klubnik's game log, the only dud he's had all season long was against Georgia, 3 DraftKings points. There's a chance that could happen again. And it makes paying up $8,600 for Klubnik really tough to swallow. Now, could Klubnik go nuclear and break the slate? Yes, that is a possibility. I don't think it is a likely outcome. I think that it's much more likely that this game looks more like the Georgia game than any other game that Clemson has played. So I do think that Klubnik at $8,600 on paper, not the best play when you consider his price and his matchup. No, granted, we've talked about this time and time again when we play DFS. Sometimes a bad play becomes a good play when nobody plays him and the guy just happens to, catch fire and go off. That could happen. I'm probably not going to be on him unless I'm playing like a game stack lineup. At the running back position, I do like Phil Maffa. And the reason why is because of his workload and also the price tag we're getting coming in. He's had 4 kind of dud games in a row. He's been under 10 DraftKings points in 4 straight. But the volume has been good. In the games against FBS competition in the last 4, 17 carries against Pitt, 20 against South Carolina, 13 against SMU. Yes, the matchup against Texas is really tough, but yes, the volume is there. At $6,300, I'm willing to pay for volume. And there's nobody else that's going to be taking his carries. Nobody else is going to be taking the targets out the backfield. He's guaranteed volume. At the wide receiver for Clemson, this is another position where they're very concentrated. Antonio Williams has very clearly been their wide receiver 1 over the second half of the season. They moved him into the slot. He's averaged about 10 targets a game since they moved him to the slot. Another guy that is guaranteed volume. And there's something to be said in DFS when you're playing a guy that's guaranteed volume, right? Now, I did get it a little bit wrong against SMU. I was not the biggest burning stool guy. He caught 2 touchdowns, had 18 DraftKings points. I was telling everybody who would listen to me to play TJ Moore, super talented freshman, play TJ Moore. He was out there all the time. He was targeted, but he only caught 3 for 32, only put up 6.2 DraftKings points. Bryant Wesco was the guy that had the big game against SMU, 8 for 143 and 2 touchdowns for 37 DraftKings points. Keep in mind, Williams, Wesco, Brinkstool, and Moore, they're going to be on the field basically the entire game. So, I think that if I'm being honest, I think it's more likely than not that Wesco's performance last game was an outlier, and you could see a much more balanced distribution between Wesco and Moore here in this one because they're both on the field. They're both getting the ball thrown their way. Wesco was just the beneficiary of 2 big plays against SMU. Adam Randall is also a guy that just has been really weird. We've gotten some differentiating injury news against SMU. I could not find him in any box score, but apparently he played. But he's $3,200. He would be the only other guy that I would consider rostering from this Clemson side. But because, like I said, they're very condensed around Williams, Wesco, Brinkstool, and Moore. And my entire take is Williams is guaranteed volume. If you're looking for a cheap dart throw receiver, I think Moore is worth a look, or you can chase the points with Wesco. On the Texas side, maybe like Quinn Ewers at quarterback. He's simply too expensive. He's $8,300. He has only hit value for that price tag once this season. It was against Florida where he threw for 5 touchdowns. I don't think he's throwing for 5 touchdowns in this one. I think he's too expensive. I don't think he's worth playing. I love the guy. He's literally Texas's third. No, hold on. Let me do the math. He's Texas's second best quarterback since Colt McCoy, which is a long time. He's right behind Sam Ehlinger, and he's great. I love the guy, but he hasn't been good from a DFS perspective, and so I'm not going to be playing him. I'm going to be targeting this Texas team through playing one-off wide receivers and the running backs. For the running backs, Quintravion Wisner is another guy like Phil Maffa that the matchup is not great. Clemson averages giving up 139 rushing yards a game, which is 46th in the nation, but he's guaranteed volume. In the last 4 games, Wisner, 19, 33, 26, and 17 carries, caught at least 2 passes in every game. He's going to see a ton of touches, and he's got one of the better matchups on the slate. I know it's not a good matchup overall, but when you think about, these are the 12 best teams in the nation. These are some of the best defenses in the nation. It's one of the better matchups on the slate for a running back. And so I do think Wisner at $6,200 makes a lot of sense. Jaden Blue, don't forget about him. He's an explosive guy. He's an explosive playmaker. He's had time to heal some of, the injuries and being banged up that he's had. He could absolutely come in and make this like a 50-50 committee with Wisner. But really, I think Wisner is the guy you want. I think if you're playing GPPs, you're looking to get a little bit different. You can take some shots on Jaden Blue. At the wide receiver position, Isaiah Bond is listed as doubtful, which is really disappointing. He's kind of like this team's downfield deep threat kind of guy. So here's what I started looking at. Isaiah Bond missed the game against Vanderbilt in week 9. In that game, DeAndre Moore Jr. showed out. He had 6 catches, 97 yards, and 2 touchdowns. He could be the guy that really breaks out in this game. He was also great against Georgia, 9 for 14 for 114 and a touchdown, which, by the way, Isaiah Bond left that game early. I think Moore is very likely the beneficiary of the snaps and the targets that are going to be vacated from Isaiah Bond. $4,200 is a very reasonable price tag. If you were listening to people who were like there at Texas practice, there's a lot of people saying that Ryan Wingo has been playing the slot and he's been taking Bond's spot, but I think that I'd rather go with what I've seen on the field, and I'm going to be playing DeAndre Moore as if he's Isaiah Bond. I might have a lineup or two. I generally 20 max, I might have a lineup or two that has Wingo on it, but I'm going to be playing a lot more DeAndre Moore. And then, oh, by the way, I'm going to be playing Matthew Golden and Gunnar Helm. Matthew Golden is a guy that has had just a consistent role in this offense, over double-digit DraftKings points in 5 straight games. He catches a lot of touchdowns. He's had 4 touchdowns over that stretch. I think he's a great play. He's starting to really blossom into a good receiving weapon for this team. He's $5,100. That's a very reasonable price tag with or without Isaiah Bond in the lineup, I might add. Then they've also got Gunnar Helm at tight end, an every down player who's a consistent part of the passing game. He's too cheap at $3,800. We've kind of gone the full spectrum with Helm, where the Arkansas week, he was way too cheap at $3,100. And then like the Texas A&M week, he was way too expensive at $4,500. He's now kind of settled in at $3,800. And you don't get a lot of every down players that have a consistent role in their team's passing offense at $3,800. I think he's worth getting into some of your lineups. And then Silas Bolden's, again, the guy I'm going to consider. This guy's just a dog. He's a punt returner. They'll get him the ball in screens, on gadget plays. He's not an every down player, but when he's out there, he makes an impact. He's $3,400. I think he's worth a GPP dart throw. I might not make that dart throw, though. All right, that does it for the first 2 games. Let's go ahead and take a quick breather, and then let's continue with the last one. Now, before we continue, I do want to mention there are places where you can get more information from me. First off, you can follow me on Twitter at Mike's Money Picks. I tweet out all updates for the show, as well as, I'm more than happy to answer any lineup questions if you reach out to me on Twitter. I know I record these days in advance, so sometimes we get injury news, we get portal news. And so if you just want to know my thoughts on something as information changes, reach out to me. I'm more than happy to answer. I'm also in the Fantasy Corner Discord. The link is in the description on YouTube as well as on the audio feed. Fantasy Corner Discord is a community of a lot of really good, really smart people who play DFS for a lot of different sports. College football is one of them. The chat in there has been great lately, and we've got a lot of really smart people in there. And so if you're looking for people to talk lineups with, talk strategy with, talk plays with, it's just a great spot to go. And then it's a blast to sweat it out together with these guys. We've got a lot of really good, really funny people in there. And so if you're just looking for a community to be a part of, it's entirely free. I highly recommend joining the Fantasy Corner Discord. Lastly, I do write some articles to my patreon.com/Mike's Money Picks, where I profile my core plays as well as why they're my core plays for every single college football DFS slate. If you want to know who's actually making my lineups, that is where you go. Now, I cannot promise that you can just plug those plays in and win thousands of dollars. It's not that easy. I don't win every slate, but what you can do is you can get information from somebody who understands the X's and O's of college football, understands the game theory of DFS, and help improve your game in college football DFS. All right, let's go ahead now and continue with the last game, which is Tennessee taking on Ohio State. I think this is probably the most compelling game of the opening round because Ohio State is just like a powder keg ready to explode one way or the other. I mean, like, you've got the fan base, they want Ryan Day to be fired, but like you look at the roster on the field, that team's talented enough to win a national championship. And I think it's going to go one way or the other with Ohio State. It's going to go real, real good, or it's going to go real, real bad. And I'm going to be interested to see how it plays out. I do think they're going to win this game. Vegas seems to agree with me. Vegas has got Ohio State as 7.5-point favorites with a game total 46.5 points. That is significantly the lowest total on the slate. It makes the implied total about 27-20 in favor of Ohio State. Now, here's the reason why I like Ohio State. It's because I'm not a believer in Tennessee's offense against quality opposition. When you look at Nico Iamaleava's stats, he really bottom fed this year. When you look at his games against bowl-eligible teams, it was not great. 29 against Vanderbilt. Yes, Vanderbilt, decent, right? That's the outlier. But 8 fantasy points against Georgia, 17 against Kentucky, 15 against Bama, 4 against Florida, 7 against Arkansas, 11 against Oklahoma. It's just he really beat up on bad teams at the start of the season, and it made us think that he was a lot better option in DFS than he was. And right now, he's coming into this slate at $5,800. He's going to be very popular because he's the cheapest quarterback play on the slate, and he's put up back-to-back games of 27 DraftKings points or more. A lot of people are going to play him. I'm going to play him sparingly because I know that the salary savings he can give you are valuable, but I'm not that confident in him putting up like 18 or more DraftKings points in this game. This Ohio State defense is very, very good. They're one of the best defenses in the nation. They rank first in the nation in points allowed per game, first in the nation in yards allowed per game, sixth in rushing yards allowed, and second in passing yards allowed. Like literally, it's them in Texas. They're the two best defenses in the nation. So I'm not super stoked to play Nico in this, but I'm telling you, a lot of people are, and it makes sense when you think about the salary that you get from it. At the running back position, Dylan Sampson, the workhorse back, the most expensive back on the slate, the top running back play on the slate. Yes, it's a brutal matchup, but they're going to give him the ball. And Tennessee, the way they play offense, like they play those wide splits from the receivers. So like they're going to, even though Ohio State's very good at defending the run, they're going to have to defend the run in a different way than they have ever before because they're going to have fewer numbers in the box because Tennessee is going to force them to empty the box. So I do expect Sampson to have some success on the ground, and I do expect him to have a ton of volume. I think he's quite clearly the top running back play on the slate overall. Like if you were just asking me, hey, Mike, who's the top running back at the end of the night going to be? I would bet on Dylan Sampson, but he's also the most expensive. So keep that in mind. I'm going to be playing him, but I'm not going to be playing like a lock status or anything, like because I do think he's the best running back play like on the slate, but the price is really tough to swallow. Really is. The wide receiver position, pretty much everybody relevant for Tennessee has a questionable tag. Dante Thornton Jr. is their big play guy. You look at his game log when he gets a big play, it's great. But there's a lot of games where he doesn't get a big play. I think if you're playing GPPs, he's got to be in your pool, but he's not going to be a significant part of my pool. Brew McCoy, starter, every down player, had 2 touchdowns against UTEP, did not do anything against Vanderbilt. In fact, I think he played that. No, he did not play that game. Yeah, maybe that attributed to Dante Thornton having a big game. But he's an every down player. He's a starter. He's $4,100. That's about all I have to say about it. Miles Kitselman's the tight end. Again, he's an almost every down player. He scores a lot of touchdowns. Touchdown dependent play at $3,400. Squirrel White, $3,300. I have been like begging for the Squirrel White game for a long, long time. Against Vanderbilt, I played a lot of Squirrel White, and he got hurt mid-game and didn't do anything. But I think he's their most talented receiver. I think he's their best receiver. He plays every down. He sees consistent volume. Like, I am just waiting for him to have a big game, and the clock is running out. $3,300. I think he's worth a look in GPPs. Chris Brazzell, the second, $3,200. He's actually their most targeted receiver on the season. Worth a look at $3,200, certainly. He was pretty good against Vanderbilt, 5 for 54, just didn't score a touchdown. And if any of the guys ahead of him, White, McCoy, or Thornton, don't play, Brazzell's going to get a ton of looks. Brazzell's the only one of those guys that's not questionable. So you will need to monitor the status of those guys. But I don't think it's a very difficult decision to late swap down. Like, we will certainly get news on if any of these guys don't play. I would anticipate they all do play. But if any of them don't play, it would be very easy to late swap down. Like if you play Thornton, you could late swap to McCoy, White, or Brazzell. If you play McCoy, you can late swap to White or Brazzell. If you play White, you can late swap to Brazzell. Like, it's just very clear that you just go down the ladder in terms of late swapping if you need to, if one of them is out. Like, I don't think that that's a super like chaotic decision to make. On the Ohio State side, we got Will Howard at quarterback, $8,200. I think he's sneakily one of the better quarterback plays on this slate. I think this Tennessee defense, the way you beat them is through the air. They're 8th nationally in rushing yards allowed per game at 101. They are 15th nationally at passing yards allowed per game at 181, but a lot of that is because of the poor quarterbacks that they have played. They have a very young secondary that can be gotten. And I think Howard could do that. I think there's a chance he does. He's a guy that also brings some rushing upside. He tends to be at his best rushing in closer games, games where Ohio State gets pushed. So I do think that this is a pretty good spot for Will Howard, all things considered, at $8,200. We've also mentioned all season long how this is a 50-50 committee between Quinshon Judkins and Travion Henderson. It makes it thoroughly frustrating to target, thoroughly frustrating to try to figure out which one's going to have the big game. Their carries are almost 50-50 down the line. Judkins has always been slightly more effective, but I'm probably not going to play either of them in my player pool just because it's a really good run defense and they're not getting all the carries. Why would I play a guy against a good run defense that's not getting all the carries when there's other guys that are playing against good run defenses that do get all the carries on this slate? So I'm just not interested in either of the two of them. I am interested in these Ohio State receivers, though. Jeremiah Smith, the super talented freshman, like big play guy, $6,200. If you're looking to stack up Will Howard, I think he would be my number one candidate. Emeka Egbuka would be second. He's more of a short and intermediate target guy. I think this Tennessee secondary can be taken deep. I do. And it would not shock me if Jeremiah Smith breaks off a deep touchdown or two here in this game. Emeka Egbuka can still see a ton of volume. I think he's a solid play, but I'm leaning Smith over Egbuka. And then Cardinal Tate's been good enough recently that he merits mentioning. He's been double-digit DraftKings points in 4 straight. If you're looking for like a Howard double stack or you're looking for like a cheap one-off receiver play, Cardinal Tate at $3,900 is not a bad option. But all right, y'all, that's going to do it here for this 3-game slate. So we've talked about all 3 games. We have broken down what you can expect to see in each game and, kind of how we expect each game to go and who could be in your DFS lineups in each game. If we were to real quick kind of start building out a lineup, this is early, this is Thursday. So take this with a grain of salt. This is not what I'm doing finally. This is kind of just thinking about something live on the air here. If I were to build out a Howard and Jennings 2 QB lineup, right? That would give me 5683 remaining. If I want to pay up to get Tyler Warren, that gives me 5380 remaining. And then if I go to Wisner at running back, 5175. So I would need to get a cheap receiver, and then I could go from there. Yeah, I feel comfortable with that. I think you can pretty comfortably start with something like that because 5375, if I just pick one SMU receiver like even Daniels, I'm up to 5400, and then if I stack Howard with Smith, I'm down to 5000, but I can still make that work. So that's kind of what I'm looking at right now. Is I think after all things considered, I think that Jennings and Howard are my top 2 QB plays, and I'm probably going to be playing it off of that. But like I said, I am going to build out some game stacks. I am going to build out some different looking lineups. But right now, kind of that's where I see it. And I do think I'm going to have a lot of hour lineups as well. So anyway, that was just kind of tinkering there on air because I've always had people say hey, how would you build out a lineup? Like that's kind of how I would start this week. But anyway, that's going to do it for this episode, y'all. Hopefully we gave you guys all the information that you need in order to build some winning DraftKings and FanDuel lineups here this Saturday. If you got any help from the video, please help me out a little bit and hit the like button on YouTube, rate and review the audio. It helps me out a ton when you guys do that. I cannot stress that enough, and I'm super appreciative of it. And it just really helps the community grow, helps people find the show, and I just cannot stress enough how thankful I am for that. But anyway, that's going to do it for this episode, y'all. Round 1 of the college football playoff is here. And like I said earlier, we're going to be back for the quarters, the semis, and the final. So make sure you're subscribed to the channel. That way you can be with us for all of those episodes as well, in addition to all of our college basketball content that's coming this winter and spring. But in case you guys can't tell, I'm super excited. So can't wait till Saturday. Looking forward to playing. Looking forward to watching and really just let's just have fun, man. Like this is finally the college football playoff for a 12-team playoff on campus sites. I'm just so excited about it, and I hope you guys are as well. But that's going to do it for this episode, y'all. Best of luck to y'all on the Saturday slate. Hopefully you guys use this information to win some money. Thank you guys for watching and listening to this point, and I will see you guys next time. And as always, one for the road, hook 'em. See you guys next time.